Sure, yeah. I mean, this grew out of really the work that I did in Tanzania, as you say, when I was living with indigenous communities, and just noticing.
This is the wedding video of Gemma Burford, a 25-year-old Oxford graduate who became Gemma Enole Ongila.
When Gemma Burford. This is the wedding video of Gemma Burford, a 25-year-old Oxford graduate who became Gemma Anlela. When Gemma Burford, a brilliant Oxford graduate, went to Tanzania for a charity project, she never considered falling in love and marrying a Maasai warrior. But sometimes, love can be found in the most unexpected places. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, Gemma married the African man, but their union had many challenges. What became of their marriage? Are Gemma and the African warrior still together? And what does her life look like 21 years later? Let's find out. An unlikely love story. Gemma met Lazar Ole Nungela while volunteering in the village of Ilui. Lazar was a Maasai warrior and the son of a Maasai herdsman. He lived in Ilui, a remote mountain village near Arusha in northern Tanzania. He grew up with 16 brothers and sisters, not to mention a father, mother, 2 stepmothers, and innumerable aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and neighbors. He went to primary school when he was 11 but could not finish his formal education because of a severe drought, which meant he had to lead his cattle to more distant pastures in search of water. He was a strong warrior who often defended his livestock against lions, leopards, and buffalo armed only with a spear and a knife while herding on the open plains. Gemma first met Lazar when she visited an arts and crafts fair in Arusha, Tanzania, in March 1999 while taking a 2-week break from her 4th year of study at Oxford. They were introduced when Lazar performed with a Maasai dance troupe at the craft festival. He wore traditional robes and beads, and they said just hello because he couldn't speak English. Gemma also did not know how to speak Swahili or understand the language. She was immediately attracted to him and thought he was nice but thought no more about it. Before Gemma flew home, however, she bumped into him and his friends again, and they told her about the charity organization called Angion. They were setting it up to help preserve their traditional culture, and she agreed to do whatever she could to help. After her 2-week break ended, Gemma returned home to complete her studies in Oxford. However, after Gemma returned to school, Lazar was elected chairman of the AN Serial Charity Organization. At home, she told all her friends about the people of Tanzania and her experiences there. She also told them about the young warrior that she met over there. Quite often, she caught herself thinking about Lazar, and it became little more than a fond memory. After graduating from Oxford, Gemma returned to Tanzania and became involved with Angie. She used the opportunity to forge ahead with her building and future program with Angrian. Gemma had started learning Swahili, and she taught Lazar some English so they could communicate better than when they first met. She often met with Lazar in her spare time to discuss their charity projects, which included building a small village school in Ilui. They had known each other for over a year at this point, and they had lots of common interests. For example, Gemma majored in natural medicines for her degree, and Lazar's tribe harvested and used herbs for their treatment. During one of her visits, he invited her to trek and meet his family in their village. The distance from the city to their village was very far, and it took almost a day to reach by truck and on foot, but his family was very welcoming. She and Lazar were strongly attracted to each other but were very aware of their different backgrounds and were cautious about starting a relationship. So when Gemma traveled back to Britain, she decided to get into a relationship with 29-year-old Alex Bell, a fellow graduate from Oxford, so that she could forget about Lazar. Gemma had met Alex at work and had been friends for a long time. They were very comfortable in each other's company, so it was easy to grow their friendship into romance. The relationship didn't last though, as it was not founded on love. It ended a few months later when Gemma experienced a life-changing ordeal. Why did it end? After she graduated from Oxford University, Gemma got a job with a medical research company in Oxford and was sent back to Arusha in the year 2000 to help set up a medical conference. It was on this trip to Tanzania in December 2000 that Gemma had a terrifying ordeal at 35,000 feet when the plane she was on got hijacked. The plane nosedived, and the cabin rocked violently from side to side. Gemma's stomach was in her mouth. The passenger next to her was praying, and others were screaming. Gemma tried to convince herself the plane had simply hit a patch of turbulence, but the reality was far worse. The British Airways flight from Gatwick to Nairobi had been hijacked. A man had broken into the cockpit and thrown himself at the controls, threatening the lives of the pilot and the 396 passengers, including Brian Ferry and Jemima Khan. Now the engines were shrieking and alarms were ringing. Gemma thought she was going to die. After a struggle, the man was eventually overpowered by passengers and crew and tied to a chair until landing. Still, the ordeal had life-changing consequences for a 22-year-old Gemma. She had never been so terrified, which made her think about her life. She pictured the people she wanted to say goodbye to and what she would have said to them. But the man on Gemma's mind wasn't Alex Bell, her boyfriend and fellow Oxford graduate with whom Gemma had discussed marriage. It was the 23-year-old Maasai warrior called Leza Olayeng Gila, who grew up in a mud hut hunting his food and, before they met, spoke barely a word of English. At that point, she realized that her feelings for Leza ran far deeper. Until then, she thought she was in love with Alex, who she had been dating for 4 months. But when the plane landed, the first person she wanted to talk to, apart from her mom and dad, was Leza. Knowing the huge impact falling in love with a Maasai tribesman would have on her life, Gemma decided to keep quiet about her feelings. She kept telling herself not to fall in love with a man who lives on the other side of the world. However, she inevitably started to notice Leza's muscles and lovely smile, and the chemistry was obvious when his hand touched hers. But still, she didn't say anything about how she felt and just flew home when she finished her conference work. Fate intervened again when, in April 2001, Gemma was asked to fly back to Tanzania for a further 6-month project. Leza agreed to act as Gemma's translator, and just days into the trip, a taxi driver asked him, "So when are you going to marry this lady?" They were both slightly embarrassed by the question, but Gemma decided it was time to tell Leza how she felt. Back at her hotel, she told him she had something really important to say, and he sat patiently until she eventually blurted out, "I think I'm falling in love with you." Leza smiled and replied slowly, "We've been in love for a long time." He admitted he had always loved her but didn't think he had any chance. Then he kissed her, which was a wonderful experience, as Gemma later admitted. When a Maasai man tells a woman he loves her, it's unsaid that it means he wants to marry her. So Leza never actually proposed, but it was assumed they would marry because they were in love. In Maasai society, casual partnerships are only accepted between teenagers, so the pair decided to get married. The following morning, Gemma wasted no time in emailing Alex, telling him she had met someone else she would be getting married to. Do you know Alex was more offended at having been dumped by email than he was at losing her? He didn't even love her that much. Next, Gemma phoned her parents. After she told her dad the news, her mom refused to come on the phone and talk to her because she was so upset. Anxious to put her mother's mind at rest, Gemma sent her a long email explaining how happy she was with Leza and that he was the love of her life. Her mom eventually came around and wrote back saying she was worried about her getting hurt. Meanwhile, Leza broke the news to his family, who were equally shocked. It was an unlikely match, and both families felt nervous about the love affair. In June 2001, Gemma's parents joined her in Arusha to meet Leza and his family, and in September, Leza made his first trip to England. It's not every day that a Maasai warrior visits England. To say that Leza caused a stir when he strolls around Burslem, Hampshire, in full traditional dress is an understatement. Thanks to his improved English, Peter and Sue, Gemma's parents, got to know him better and approved the relationship. In January 2003, Gemma married Leza Olayeng Gila, the African warrior, in a traditional Maasai ceremony at the age of 25. The wedding took place in Ilui and was attended by Gemma's family and 500 Maasai. Gemma's parents, Sue and Peter Burford of Southampton, had travelled with Pam and Paul, their 2 sons, to Tanzania for the wedding. Gemma wore a wedding dress made of beaded oxen and received goats and cattle as gifts. Adapting to life in a tribal village was a huge challenge, but Gemma was determined to weather it as she had chosen that life. There was no electricity in the home, the roads were bad, especially when they had a drought, and they had to walk almost a kilometre to get water. Despite this hardship, Gemma seemed happy with her new life. Lazar later built a new mud hut for his family, which cost about £2,000 to build and was a mansion by village standards. Gemma installed an electric hob and solar panels in the home to make life more comfortable, though they still had to walk a distance to get water from the village's water pump. The couple also had a flat in a nearby town that Gemma used as her workspace as a research consultant. Gemma and Lazar welcomed their first daughter, Lucia, in April 2004. The year after their marriage, their second daughter Susanna was born in September 2005. Their relationship was a culture shock to everyone. There was some resistance to Gemma in the village initially, however, it was no longer an issue once they married and had kids. The idea was then a reality, and the people accepted her. Accomplishments and challenges. Their shared interest in social causes strengthened the marriage between Gemma and Lazar. Together, they co-founded initiatives to support women's rights and end harmful gender practices. One of their most prominent accomplishments was building a community school in Elawai village. The school uses a curriculum that fuses traditional Maasai and formal knowledge with a unique co-curricular program to preserve indigenous knowledge about medicinal plants. Through the non-governmental organization Angayon, the couple developed programs that empowered young people to document and research the indigenous knowledge of their societies. The program sustained biological and cultural diversity and bridged the generation gap often arising from formal education. Gemma and Lazar also dedicated themselves to various charity endeavors, including campaigns to combat female genital mutilation. Female genital mutilation in Maasai communities is a cultural practice involving the removal of young girls' genitals as a rite of passage from girlhood to adulthood. The age at which it is carried out depends on the community, but the practice is most commonly performed under age 15. It is estimated that at least 200 million girls and women alive today have undergone female genital cutting, mainly in Africa, with an estimated 7.9 million Tanzanian women between 15 and 49 years being recorded, according to the United Nations Population Fund. Female genital mutilation violates human rights principles and standards, including the principles of equality and non-discrimination based on gender, the right to freedom from torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading punishment, the right to the highest attainable standard of health, the rights of the child, the right to physical and mental integrity, and even the right to life. Anthropological and sociological research links the practice to beliefs about fertility, appropriate sexual behavior, hygiene, and beauty. In some communities, the practice is a rite of passage into womanhood and thus linked to marriageability and childbearing, while in others it links to religious requirements or ethnic identity. The Maasai community believes that a curse will follow girls who do not undergo it. Female genital mutilation is a harmful practice, as some girls die from excessive bleeding, and many suffer serious long-term complications for the rest of their lives. Gemma introduced different initiatives to end the barbaric act. For example, she provided education to the community about the dangerous effects of female genital mutilation on their girls. She introduced alternative rites of passage, where a girl undergoes all traditional rites of passage education but without the cut. She also trained rural women to use the power of song to eradicate the ancient tradition of female genital mutilation. In addition to their philanthropy work, she and Lazar also started a safari company called Areti, which specializes in giving tourists an insight into the Maasai. They engaged in tours that allowed people to explore Africa up close, including staying at Maasai villages and learning traditional crafts. The couple appeared happy in moments together, leading many to believe in the possibility of a fairy tale ending to their story. However, in 2010, their marriage ended. The exact cause of their separation remains unknown. Speculation suggests that Lazar may have desired to take a second wife, a common polygamous practice among Maasai men, which Gemma was unwilling to accept. Since the wealth of a Maasai man is measured by the number of children he has, Lazar moved on and had more children with other wives. Gemma was so angry about his decision and decided to leave him. After their separation, Gemma returned to the United Kingdom with her 2 daughters, and they still keep in touch with Tanzania, their homeland. But there hasn't been much news about Lazar since then. Her life today. It has been 21 years since Gemma made the life-changing decision to get married to Lazar. She is now 47 years old and still actively involved in advocacy and empowerment through education and sustainable practices. Professionally, Gemma Burford is now a co-director and former research associate of the Global Initiative for Traditional Systems of Health and co-editor of the World Health Organization Global Atlas on Traditional, Complementary, and Alternative Medicine. She is a healer and transformational facilitator, an internationally acclaimed author writing on well-being and sustainability. She now lives in the United Kingdom, using what she learned in Africa and in the sacred landscapes of southern England to help people rediscover their inner peace, purpose, passion, and power through her 19 songs of reunion. Her daughter Lucia is now 21 years old. She is already a successful young woman and a photographer just like her mom. She enjoys volunteering and helping others. She is even the director of Elevate Young Minds, a youth organization that works on finding solutions to local and global problems. Susanna, her younger sister, is 20 years old, but there aren't many details about her life. It was a crazy love between two people from different worlds. Gemma gave up her Western life in Oxford for a Maasai warrior, and Lazar agreed to marry a foreigner and violate the customs of his tribe. They could have been happy, but perhaps the gap between their worlds was too wide. Let's delve briefly into where it all began. Gemma Burford, the Tanzania lover. Where it all began. Gemma was born in 1978 in Old Burson, a quiet village in Hampshire in the south of England. Gemma was the only child of a middle-class English couple. Her mother, Sue, worked in a library, and her father, Peter, was an accountant. When Gemma was still very young, she exhibited remarkable aptitude for learning. Did you know that she taught herself to read when she was just 18 months old? Yes, you heard that right. Well, this was perceived as unusual then, and her parents had to take her to seek the opinion of educational psychologists. After a thorough examination, Gemma was diagnosed as a highly gifted child with a high IQ. During her childhood, she wrote several poems and novels, was very good at playing the violin, and volunteered for charity organizations. She showcased her academic excellence when she sat for and gained 13 GCSE A grades and 4 A levels. Because of this exceptional accomplishment, she was admitted to the prestigious Oxford University at 17. There, she pursued a degree in biochemistry and was determined to make the best out of it. She graduated with a master's degree at the age of 21. During her time in Oxford, she did not limit herself to classroom education but got involved in social causes and humanitarian services. Gemma was determined to make a difference in the world. Even though her academic pursuits were demanding, she still found time to engage deeply with various charitable activities. You would always find her in fundraising outreaches, and she was always ready to volunteer for causes that she knew would bring a change to humanity. Her involvement in these humanitarian activities laid the foundation that would define her future path. In 1999, Gemma was in the final year of her biochemistry degree and took a break from her studies. She traveled to Tanzania to assist a charity preserving traditional African cultures. Her stay in Tanzania was a wholesome experience for her. She was introduced to the Maasai community and fell in love with the people. The Maasai community is known for its rich cultural heritage and unique traditions. They put so much effort into preserving their tradition and culture so it doesn't go extinct in the face of modernization, and this was what made Gemma love them and decide to settle there. Upon her arrival in Tanzania, Gemma joined a charity organization called Angaion, which means House of Peace in the Maasai language. Angaion is a registered Tanzanian cultural association set up to promote, preserve, and document the traditional cultures of East Africa, build self-esteem among youth, and uphold the rights of indigenous peoples. The organization offers two main volunteer programs, the Teach and Learn program and the Building for the Future program. Gemma chose the Building for the Future program and was tasked to help build a school in the remote village of Ilui, a project to integrate indigenous knowledge into formal education. Despite lacking financial resources, Gemma committed wholeheartedly to the cause and was determined to see its reality. That was the start of her relationship with the community and its people. As her work in Ilui progressed, Gemma learned more about the people and their way of life. She participated in daily activities, attended ceremonies and cultural events, and gradually earned the community's trust and respect. Because of her charming and endearing nature, she was able to make friends with many villagers. During this period, Gemma met Lazar Ole Ninjala, a proud Maasai warrior who later became her husband. Like Gemma, the Maasai warrior was deeply interested in community development and culture preservation. This brought them close, and soon it evolved into a life-changing partnership. However, this didn't last forever.